Walking dogs in the quiet suburban streets of Pine Valley was supposed to be Sarah Mitchell's way of finding peace after 12 years as a Navy SEAL. But when local bikers started harassing elderly residents, she had no idea her intervention would uncover a massive criminal operation. Now, surrounded by the Iron Wolves motorcycle gang in their fortified compound, Sarah was about to remind them why threatening a former special operations veteran was a fatal mistake. Before we dive into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you enjoy stories of justice being served, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got another incredible tale waiting for you tomorrow. Now let's begin. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Pine Valley's tree-lined streets as Sarah Mitchell led her pack of dogs through their morning routine. After serving as one of the first female Navy SEALs, the simple act of walking dogs had become her therapy, a way to process the memories of countless covert operations. The 5 dogs in her care moved with disciplined precision, evidence of her military background influencing even this peaceful profession. Through her sunglasses, Sarah noticed Mrs. Henderson's house, the elderly woman who'd hired her to walk her golden retriever Max. The previous day, Mrs. Henderson had tearfully confided about threatening visits from men on motorcycles, pressuring her to sell her property. Similar stories had been circulating through the neighborhood, all involving the Iron Wolves, a motorcycle gang that had recently established themselves in the area. "Looking good there, Max," Sarah spoke softly to the golden retriever, her trained eyes scanning the street. 12 years in special operations had taught her to recognize surveillance patterns. The black motorcycle that had passed by 3 times wasn't just joyriding. Her phone buzzed. Another client, Mr. Chen, canceling services. 3rd one this week. The Iron Wolves were systematically pressuring property owners, particularly targeting elderly residents living alone. Their tactics were too organized for simple gang intimidation. A motorcycle's roar shattered the morning calm. 3 riders pulled up, their leather cuts displaying the Iron Wolves insignia, a snarling wolf head with blazing red eyes. Sarah positioned herself between her dogs and the approaching bikers, her stance subtly shifting from dog walker to combat ready. "Nice dogs you got there," the lead rider smirked, killing his engine. "Shame if something happened to them. Neighborhood's getting dangerous these days. Maybe folks should consider selling while they can." Sarah maintained her calm, but her mind was already cataloging details. The riders' formations, their weapon prints poorly concealed under leather jackets, their communication patterns. These weren't ordinary gang members. "You're going to want to step back," Sarah warned, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded special operations teams. "These dogs are under my protection." The lead biker, Ghost stitched on his cut, laughed. "Lady, you don't understand how things work here now. Iron Wolves are just trying to help elderly folks make smart decisions about their property. Stay out of it." Before they could react, Sarah had already noted their weak points. Ghost favored his right leg. Recent injury. The rider on his left kept touching his earpiece. Communication with others watching. The third's boots showed tactical wear patterns. These were trained operators using a gang as cover. "I understand perfectly," Sarah replied, keeping her voice level while scanning for additional surveillance. "I also understand you're not just harassing elderly residents for property. This is too organized, too professional. The Iron Wolves are front for something bigger." Ghost's demeanor shifted, predatory amusement replaced by cold calculation. "You've got good eyes, military?" "Dog walker," Sarah answered, though her posture told a different story. Through her earpiece, disguised as a regular Bluetooth device, Sarah's surveillance detection program had already mapped 4 more motorcycles approaching from side streets. "Well, dog walker," Ghost leaned forward. "Take some friendly advice. Pine Valley's changing. People who ask too many questions who don't cooperate. They tend to have accidents." Sarah met his gaze, letting just enough of her combat experience show through. "Like the accident at Mrs. Peterson's last week? Convenient how she agreed to sell right after her home got vandalized." The tension ratcheted up. Ghost's hand moved subtly toward his concealed weapon. Sarah's muscles coiled, ready to respond, but the dogs remained perfectly calm, trained to stay steady in confrontation. "You've got no idea what you're walking into," Ghost warned, starting his bike. "For someone who works with dogs, You really should know better than to bark up the wrong tree. As the bikers roared away, Sarah's trained mind processed the encounter. Their equipment, their movements, their tactical awareness. The Iron Wolves were more than common criminals. Someone was using a motorcycle gang as cover for a sophisticated operation. Sarah clicked her tongue, signaling her dogs to heel. The peaceful morning walk had confirmed her suspicions. Now she needed to understand what the Iron Wolves were really doing in Pine Valley, and why they were so desperate to acquire specific properties. What they didn't know was that taking on a former Navy SEAL wasn't their biggest mistake. Threatening the community she'd sworn to protect, that was going to be their last. Through her concealed camera, Sarah had documented the entire encounter. The Iron Wolves thought they were intimidating a simple dog walker. They were about to learn that some wolves are more dangerous than others. Back at her modest ranch-style home, Sarah Mitchell began piecing together the pattern that had been troubling her for weeks. The former SEAL's living room wall had become an intelligence center, tracking Iron Wolves' activities across Pine Valley. Property records, surveillance photos, and incident reports created a disturbing picture. "What do you think, Duke?" She addressed her personal companion, a Belgian Malinois who'd served with her in special operations. The dog's ears perked up as Sarah traced lines between photos. "They're not just pressuring random homeowners. There's a pattern here." Her tactical training kicked in as she analyzed the data. The Iron Wolves were targeting specific properties, all along the old railway line that cut through Pine Valley. Properties that individually seemed unremarkable, but together formed a strategic corridor. Sarah's laptop displayed satellite imagery of the area. The abandoned railway station, supposedly being renovated by Valley Development Corporation, had shown unusual activity lately. Late-night deliveries, professional security teams, surveillance equipment that went beyond normal construction site protection. Her phone buzzed. Detective Mark Torres, an old friend from her SEAL days, now working Pine Valley PD. "Sarah, got something you need to see?" Torres said without preamble. "Remember those property records you asked about? Just found connections to shell companies, all leading back to some outfit called Nexus Security Solutions." Sarah's combat instincts tingled. Nexus? They're a private military contractor. Worked with them on operations in South America. What are they doing buying property in Pine Valley? "That's not all," Torres continued. "Iron Wolves' new leadership? Just traced their president Victor Kane, ex-Delta Force. His whole command team, all former special operations." Sarah studied Kane's photo on her wall. The Iron Wolves' president had seemed too professional, too tactical in his operations. Now she knew why. "They're using the gang as cover," Sarah concluded. "Professional operators hiding behind motorcycle patches. Question is, what's worth bringing in this level of expertise?" Through her window, Sarah spotted a black SUV passing by, third time today. Her surveillance detection training noted the professional driving pattern, the carefully maintained distance. "Getting interesting," Torres noted. "Just pulled building permits for that railway station renovation. Equipment they're bringing in, it's not for construction. Industrial generators, high-grade security systems, communication arrays." Sarah's doorbell interrupted them. Through her security camera, she saw Mrs. Henderson clutching papers and looking terrified. "Got to go, Mark. Keep digging." Mrs. Henderson practically collapsed into Sarah's living room, her hands shaking. "They came back, Sarah. Said if I don't sign by tomorrow?" She thrust forward property documents. "They're offering 3 times market value, but something's wrong. The whole block. They're pressuring everyone." Sarah examined the papers, her tactical mind noting details. The buying company traced back through 3 shells to Nexus Security. Professional deniability. "What made you come to me?" Sarah asked gently, though she suspected the answer. "Tommy, my grandson." Mrs. Henderson wiped her eyes. "He's Army. Said if I ever needed help, to find someone military. Said you'd understand." Sarah's wall map suddenly revealed new significance. The Iron Wolves weren't just buying properties. They were creating a secure corridor, professionally concealed under legitimate purchases. Her phone buzzed again. Torres sending surveillance photos. The railway station renovation had just received another late-night delivery. The images showed crates being unloaded, marked with familiar military contractor codes. "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah said carefully, "I need you to tell me exactly what you saw at their last meeting. Every detail." As the elderly woman described the Iron Wolves' latest visit, Sarah's trained mind cataloged tactical information, their approach routes, team positions, communication patterns. They were running a professional operation disguised as gang intimidation. Through her window, Sarah spotted another surveillance vehicle. Different team, same professional tradecraft. They were watching her now, which meant she was getting close to something. "Stay here," Sarah told Mrs. Henderson, her SEAL training already formulating response plans. "I need to make some calls." Whatever Nexus Security was building in Pine Valley, they'd brought in professional operators and were using the Iron Wolves as cover. But they'd made a crucial mistake, threatening a community protected by someone trained to uncover exactly these kinds of operations. The question wasn't just what they were hiding, but why they needed such a specific collection of properties to hide it. Sarah had seen similar patterns before in operations too classified to discuss. Now those same tactics were being used in her hometown. As she secured her property records in a hidden safe, Sarah knew the Iron Wolves' next move would be more direct. They couldn't risk her investigating further, but that's exactly what she was trained to do: expose what others wanted to keep hidden. Sarah's evidence gathering intensified over the next 2 days, her military training helping her document the Iron Wolves' operation with precision. The railway station renovation had become her primary focus, especially after Torres provided building schematics that didn't match official permits. "They're building something underground," Sarah muttered, studying satellite thermal imaging on her laptop. Duke lay alert beside her, his training allowing him to sense her tension. The heat signatures from the construction site showed power consumption far beyond normal renovation needs. Her doorbell camera activated, showing another elderly resident, Mr. Chen, from 3 blocks over. Before she could respond, she noticed movement on her perimeter sensors. 4 motorcycles approaching from different directions, professional tactical spacing. "Duke, silent watch," she commanded quietly, the dog immediately taking position. Sarah activated her home's security protocols, systems she'd installed based on combat experience. Through concealed cameras, she watched the Iron Wolves establishing containment positions around her property. Her phone buzzed. Torres. "Sarah, you've got trouble incoming. Just intercepted police calls. Iron Wolves are mobilizing across town. They're making coordinated moves on multiple properties." "They're here already," Sarah replied calmly, her combat mindset engaging. 4-man team, tactical positioning. They're not trying to intimidate anymore, this is a professional operation. Her surveillance system highlighted more approaching vehicles, black SUVs with tactical teams. Not bikers this time. These were Nexus Security contractors moving with military precision. "Get those property documents to the feds," Sarah instructed. Something about that railway station spooked them. They're accelerating their timeline. Through her security feeds, Sarah watched Ghost coordinate with the tactical teams. Their radio frequencies were encrypted, but their movement patterns told her everything. This wasn't gang enforcement. This was a professional containment operation. Sarah's laptop pinged with data from her surveillance program. The thermal imaging had caught something significant. Massive power signatures beneath the railway station, consistent with advanced communication arrays and security systems. Her phone buzzed again, Mrs. Henderson this time. "Sarah, they're at my house. Different men, not the bikers. They're saying if I don't sign now, stall them," Sarah instructed, her mind already formulating plans. "Tell them your lawyer needs to review the final documents. I've got evidence of what they're really building, but I need time." Outside, the tactical teams had established complete coverage of her property. Their coordination showed extensive military training. These weren't ordinary contractors. Sarah's tactical computer decoded partial radio transmissions. Subject has evidence of subsurface construction. Secure all documentation. Eliminate surveillance capabilities. Torres. Sarah spoke quietly into her secure line. "They're not just here for intimidation. They know I've documented their operation. Whatever they're building under that railway station, it's big enough to risk exposing their whole operation to protect it. Her sensors picked up electronic warfare signatures. They were preparing to jam communications. Professional teams with military-grade equipment, all to stop one dog walker from exposing their operation. Sarah quickly transferred her evidence to secure servers, something she'd learned in special operations. Never keep all your intelligence in one location. Through her cameras, she watched Ghost approach her front door, flanked by tactical teams. "Final chance, dog walker," Ghost called out. "Turn over your surveillance footage, property documentation, everything you've collected. Walk away from this, no one needs to get hurt." Sarah's mind raced through combat scenarios. They had superior numbers, professional equipment, tactical positioning. But she had something they didn't: intimate knowledge of close-quarters combat and a partner trained for exactly these situations. "Duke, protective formation," she whispered. The Belgian Malinois moved silently into position as Sarah activated her home's defensive measures. Systems designed by someone who understood exactly how professional teams would approach a containment operation. Through her feeds, she watched more tactical teams arriving. They'd brought serious resources to silence one dog walker, which meant she'd discovered something they desperately needed to keep hidden. "Last warning," Ghost announced. "We know you've got evidence about the railway station construction. Whatever you think you've uncovered, you've got no idea what you're really dealing with." Sarah checked her defensive positions one final time. They thought they were dealing with a simple dog walker who'd seen too much. They were about to learn that some operators never really leave the service, they just find new missions to fight. As Ghost's team prepared to breach, Sarah's combat training took over. They had the numbers and equipment, but she had something more valuable: the determination to protect her community from whatever operation they were hiding beneath Pine Valley's streets. The Iron Wolves breach came precisely as Sarah had anticipated. Years of special operations had taught her how professional teams would approach a containment operation. As they moved to secure her property, she was already executing her counter-strategy. "Duke, defensive," she whispered. The Belgian Malinois moved silently into shadow as Ghost's team breached her front door with practiced efficiency. Their movements confirmed her suspicions. These weren't ordinary gang members, but trained operators using the Iron Wolves as cover. Sarah watched through her security feeds as tactical teams entered with military precision. Their equipment was top-tier: thermal imaging, encrypted comms, professional breaching gear. Nexus security wasn't taking chances. "Clear the main floor," Ghost commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to leading combat operations. "Find those documents." Sarah had already activated her home's defensive measures, systems designed by someone who understood exactly how professional teams would operate. As they moved through her house, concealed sensors mapped their positions, feeding data to her tactical computer. "Nothing in the office," one team reported. "No physical documents, no computer hardware." Ghost's frustration was evident. "Keep searching. Those surveillance photos, property records, they have to be here. Command wants everything she's documented about the railway station secured." Through her hidden cameras, Sarah watched them discover her intelligence wall, now stripped bare. Let them waste time searching while her real evidence was already being transmitted to secure servers. "Sir, we've got movement in the basement," another team reported. "Thermal signatures showing." The power cut suddenly, plunging the house into darkness. Sarah's night vision activated automatically as her defensive systems initiated. Professional teams always expected resistance, but not from someone who'd spent years planning for exactly this scenario. "Multiple heat signatures," a tactical operator called out. "They're in the walls." "Those aren't people," Ghost realized too late. "Those are—" Sarah's security systems activated in sequence. Non-lethal countermeasures designed to disorient professional teams, sonic pulses, infrared strobes, targeted electromagnetic interference, systems she'd developed based on years of combat experience. Duke moved like a shadow, his military training making him deadly effective in close quarters. The tactical teams, despite their professional equipment, weren't prepared for a trained military dog operating in complete darkness. "Command, we've got problems," Ghost transmitted. "Subject has military-grade countermeasures. These aren't civilian systems." Sarah moved through her house with practiced efficiency, using routes she'd drilled countless times. The tactical teams were good, but they were fighting on her territory, against defenses designed by someone who understood their playbook. "Fall back to containment positions," Ghost ordered. "She's got to be recording this. Find her surveillance system." Through her feeds, Sarah watched more Nexus security teams arriving. They were escalating, bringing in heavier equipment. Whatever she'd discovered about their railway station operation, they were willing to risk exposure to protect it. Her phone vibrated. Torres. "Sarah, got federal response incoming, but Nexus has people in local law enforcement. They're delaying official response." "They need time to secure their evidence," Sarah replied quietly, moving to another defensive position. "Whatever they're building under that railway station, it's big enough to risk a tactical operation in broad daylight." Ghost's voice carried through her house. "We know who you are now, Mitchell. Special Operations Navy SEAL. You understand how this works. Walk away. Let us secure our intelligence. No one needs to get hurt." Sarah's tactical computer decoded more transmissions. "Subsurface facility compromised. Accelerate timeline. Eliminate all surveillance evidence." Through her cameras, she watched Ghost coordinate with newly arrived tactical teams. They were setting up for a sustained operation, bringing in electronic warfare equipment to counter her defenses. "Last chance, Mitchell," Ghost announced. "You're outnumbered, surrounded. Whatever you think you've uncovered about our operation, it's bigger than you know. Stand down." Sarah checked her defensive positions one final time. They had superior numbers, professional equipment, tactical advantage. But she had something they'd forgotten about: the determination that had made her one of the first female Navy SEALs. As Ghost's teams prepared for their next breach, Sarah's combat instincts took over. They thought superior force would make her surrender evidence of their illegal operation. They were about to learn why some operators never stop fighting, especially when protecting their community from those who would harm it. Detective Torres coordinated rapidly with federal response teams from his unmarked car near Sarah's property. The tactical situation was deteriorating. Nexus Security had brought in serious hardware, far beyond normal private contractor equipment. "Got movement at the railway station," his partner Detective Chen reported, monitoring surveillance feeds. "They're accelerating whatever operation they're running down there. Multiple vehicles arriving, professional security teams deploying." Torres's secure phone buzzed. Sarah's evidence transfer was complete. The documentation she'd gathered about Nexus Security's underground facility, now safely stored on federal servers. His tactical display showed more Iron Wolves arriving, establishing perimeter positions around her house. "They've got the place surrounded," Chen observed. "Professional containment protocols. These aren't ordinary bikers." Through their surveillance, they watched Ghost coordinate with Nexus security teams. Their radio communications were encrypted, but their movements told a clear story. This was a major operation to secure whatever evidence Sarah had gathered. "Federal response is 20 minutes out," Torres reported, checking updates. "But Nexus has people in local law enforcement. They're redirecting resources, creating delays." His phone buzzed again, this time from Captain Richards, his supervisor. "Torres, stand down. This is a local matter. Iron Wolves are handling a property dispute." "Negative, sir," Torres replied firmly. "We've got evidence of illegal construction, corporate fraud, professional tactical teams operating in a civilian area. This is way beyond gang activity." Through their feeds, they watched more Nexus contractors arriving, bringing in electronic warfare equipment, signal jammers, professional breaching gear. Whatever Sarah had discovered about their railway station operation, they were willing to risk exposure to protect it. "Multiple teams converging," Chen reported. "They're setting up for a sustained operation. This isn't about intimidation anymore. They're going to breach with force." Torres's tactical computer decoded partial transmissions. "Secure all surveillance evidence. Eliminate documentation of subsurface facility. Accelerate Project Echo timeline." Sarah, Torres transmitted on their secure channel. Federal response is incoming but delayed. Nexus has serious resources invested in this operation. Whatever you found under that railway station, it's bigger than we thought, Sarah's calm voice replied. Their construction permits don't match building plans. They're creating something massive underground, using the Iron Wolves to secure property rights through intimidation. Torres watched through surveillance as Ghost's teams prepared for another breach attempt. Their equipment and tactics showed extensive military training. These weren't ordinary contractors. Got movement at the railway station, Chen reported suddenly. They're moving something. Large equipment cases, professional security escort. Whatever they're building down there, they're accelerating their timeline. Torres's phone buzzed with updates from federal contacts. Nexus Security's corporate records showed massive financial transfers, shell companies, connections to classified military contracts. This wasn't just about property acquisition. Sarah, Torres transmitted, be advised. Nexus is mobilizing additional teams. Whatever evidence you've gathered about their operation, they're willing to commit serious resources to secure it. Through their feeds, they watched Ghost coordinate the next breach attempt. The tactical teams moved with professional precision, but Sarah's defensive systems had already proven more sophisticated than they'd expected. Federal response is being actively delayed, Torres reported. Frustration evident. Nexus has people in multiple agencies. They're creating bureaucratic roadblocks. His tactical display showed more Iron Wolves arriving, establishing expanded perimeter positions. This wasn't just about securing evidence anymore. They were preparing for a prolonged operation. Got data from the railway station construction site, Chen announced. Power consumption, equipment manifests, security protocols. This is military-grade infrastructure they're building underground. Torres watched as Nexus Security brought in heavier equipment. They were escalating, willing to risk exposure to protect whatever operation Sarah had uncovered. His combat experience told him the situation was about to become much more volatile. Through their secure channel, Sarah's voice remained calm despite the deteriorating situation. They thought intimidating elderly residents would hide their operation. They're about to learn why threatening a community protected by Special Operations veterans was their biggest mistake. Sarah moved silently through her darkened house, Duke at her side, as Nexus security teams attempted their third breach. Her surveillance systems tracked 12 operators, all moving with professional precision, but she'd prepared for exactly this scenario. Main level clear, a tactical team reported. No sign of target or surveillance equipment. Ghost's frustration carried through their comms. Find those documents. Command wants all evidence about the railway station secured. Now. Sarah's tactical computer continued decoding their encrypted transmissions, revealing more about their true operation. References to Project Echo and subsurface installations painted a disturbing picture of what they were building beneath Pine Valley. Through her feeds, she watched more contractors arriving, bringing in sophisticated electronic warfare equipment. They weren't just trying to secure evidence. They were preparing to completely eliminate her surveillance capabilities. Got something, one team reported. Hidden server room, professional setup. She's been documenting everything. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. They'd found exactly what she wanted them to find. A decoy system designed to keep them occupied while her real evidence was already safely transmitted. Her phone buzzed quietly, Torres updating her on the railway station. Major activity at the construction site. They're moving heavy equipment underground, accelerating whatever they're building. Sarah, these aren't normal construction materials. Military-grade infrastructure, she replied softly, moving to another defensive position. They're creating something massive down there, using the Iron Wolves to secure property rights through intimidation. Duke's ears perked up, detecting movement in the walls. The tactical teams were trying to bypass her security by accessing maintenance spaces, exactly as her SEAL training had predicted they would. Command, we've got problems, a team leader reported. These aren't civilian defense systems. Subject has military-grade countermeasures, professional setup. Ghost's voice carried authority born of combat experience. Mitchell, we know about your special operations background. You understand protocol. Stand down. Let us secure our intelligence. This is bigger than you realize. Sarah's tactical computer highlighted new thermal signatures. They were bringing in heavier breaching equipment. Whatever she'd discovered about Project Echo, they were willing to risk significant exposure to protect it. Through her feeds, she watched Iron Wolves establishing expanded perimeter positions. The motorcycle gang was providing cover while Nexus Security conducted their real operation. Torres, she transmitted quietly. They're escalating. Multiple tactical teams, professional equipment. Whatever they're building under that railway station, it's significant enough to risk this level of exposure. Her surveillance detected new electronic warfare signatures. They were preparing to jam all communications, isolate her completely. But Sarah had planned for this, her systems designed by someone who understood exactly how professional teams operated. "Final warning, Mitchell," Ghost announced. "You're surrounded, outgunned. Whatever evidence you think you have about our operation, it's not worth dying for." Sarah checked her defensive positions one last time. They had superior numbers and equipment, but they'd made one crucial mistake, threatening a community protected by someone trained to expose exactly these kinds of black operations. Through her secure channel, Torres reported federal response was still being actively delayed. Nexus Security had deep connections, able to create bureaucratic roadblocks across multiple agencies. As Ghost's teams prepared for their next breach attempt, Sarah's combat instincts took over. They thought superior force would make her surrender evidence of their illegal operation. They were about to learn why some operators never stop fighting, especially when protecting their community from those who would harm it. Duke moved silently into position, his military training making him deadly effective in close quarters. The tactical teams were professional, but they weren't prepared for a trained military dog and a former SEAL operating in their own territory. The full scope of Project Echo began to emerge as Sarah accessed partial data from Nexus Security's communications. Their railway station operation wasn't just an underground facility. It was a classified military installation being built without federal oversight. "Target's surveillance systems are more sophisticated than expected," Ghost reported to his command. "She's documented everything about the subsurface construction: thermal imaging, power signatures, equipment manifests." Sarah's tactical computer continued decoding their encrypted transmissions. References to experimental weapons testing and classified defense contracts revealed why they'd gone to such lengths to hide their operation. Through her feeds, she watched more contractors arriving with specialized equipment. They weren't just trying to secure evidence anymore. They were preparing to completely eliminate any trace of their illegal facility. "Got movement at the railway station," Torres transmitted on their secure channel. "They're accelerating construction, multiple teams moving classified equipment underground. Sarah, these energy signatures. This is advanced weapons technology." "Explains why they needed specific properties," Sarah replied quietly, moving to another defensive position. "They're building a testing facility for experimental military hardware, using the Iron Wolves to secure their perimeter through intimidation." Her surveillance detected new electronic warfare signatures as Ghost's teams prepared another breach attempt. They were bringing in military-grade jamming equipment, determined to eliminate her documentation of their operation. "Mitchell," Ghost's voice carried command authority. "Whatever you think you've uncovered about Project Echo, it's classified beyond your clearance. Stand down. Let us secure our intelligence. This ends now." Sarah's tactical computer highlighted new thermal signatures. They were positioning teams for a coordinated breach. Whatever she'd discovered about their weapons program, they were willing to risk significant exposure to protect it. Through her feeds, she watched Iron Wolves establishing expanded containment positions. The motorcycle gang was providing deniable security while Nexus conducted their black operations. "Sarah," Torres transmitted urgently, "federal response is still being blocked. Nexus has deep connections. They're burying this under national security classifications. But I've got evidence of unauthorized weapons testing, corporate fraud, illegal property seizures." Duke's ears perked up, detecting movement in the walls. The tactical teams were attempting to bypass her security through maintenance spaces, exactly as her SEAL training had predicted. Command target's defenses are military grade, a team leader reported. She's got countermeasures we've never seen. Professional setup, designed by someone who knows our protocols. Ghost coordinated with newly arrived tactical teams bringing in heavier breaching equipment. Mitchell, last chance. You're surrounded, outgunned. This operation is classified for a reason. Stand down. Sarah checked her defensive positions one final time. They had superior numbers and equipment, but they'd made one crucial mistake, threatening a community protected by someone trained to expose illegal black operations. Through her secure channel, Torres reported more disturbing findings. Railway station power consumption matches experimental weapons signatures. They're testing classified military hardware without authorization or oversight. As Ghost teams prepared for their next breach, Sarah's combat instincts took over. They thought superior force would make her surrender evidence of their illegal weapons program. They were about to learn why some operators never stop fighting, especially when protecting their community from unauthorized military operations. Duke moved silently into position, his military training making him deadly effective in close quarters. The tactical teams were professional, but they weren't prepared for a former SEAL who'd spent years planning for exactly this scenario. Through her feeds, Sarah watched more Nexus contractors arriving with specialized equipment. Whatever classified weapons they were testing beneath Pine Valley, they were willing to commit significant resources to keep it hidden. Multiple forces converged on Sarah's position as the situation reached its climax. Federal response teams had finally broken through Nexus Security's bureaucratic roadblocks, while Ghost's tactical teams prepared for their final breach attempt. All teams in position, Ghost transmitted. Breach on my mark. Secure all evidence of Project Echo. Command wants everything about the railway station operation contained. Sarah's surveillance systems tracked 20 operators now, all with military-grade equipment. Through her feeds, she watched more Nexus contractors establishing defensive positions around the property. Sarah, Torres transmitted urgently, federal teams are 10 minutes out, but Nexus is accelerating their timeline at the railway station. They're preparing to move something major underground. Her tactical computer decoded more encrypted transmissions. Weapons testing protocols compromised. Initiate containment procedures. Eliminate all surveillance evidence. Ghost's voice carried command authority. Mitchell, we know you've documented the subsurface facility. Whatever evidence you think you have, it ends now. Stand down or we breach with maximum force. Through her feeds, Sarah watched Iron Wolves coordinating with professional tactical teams. The motorcycle gang had become a perfect cover for Nexus Security's black operations. Got confirmation, Torres reported. Railway station power signatures match classified weapons testing. They're running unauthorized military experiments without federal oversight. Duke moved silently beside Sarah, detecting movement in multiple directions. The tactical teams were positioning for a coordinated breach, using professional containment protocols. Command, target's defenses are beyond anything we've encountered, a team leader reported. Military-grade countermeasures, professional security systems. She was ready for this. Sarah's tactical computer highlighted new thermal signatures. They were bringing in specialized breaching equipment. Whatever classified weapons they were testing, they were willing to risk significant exposure to protect their operation. Final warning, Ghost announced. You're surrounded, outgunned, with no support incoming. Stand down. Let us secure our intelligence. This is bigger than you understand. Through her secure channel, Torres transmitted frantically. Sarah, they're moving something massive at the railway station. Energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever weapon they're testing down there. Sarah checked her defensive positions one last time. They had superior numbers and equipment, but they'd made one crucial mistake, threatening a community protected by someone trained to expose illegal military operations. All teams prepare for breach, Ghost commanded. Subject has extensive special operations background. Expect professional resistance. Before he could finish, Sarah's countermeasures activated in sequence. Systems designed by someone who understood exactly how tactical teams would approach a containment operation. Duke moved with deadly efficiency in the darkness, his military training making him a force multiplier. The tactical teams were professional, but they weren't prepared for a trained military dog and a former SEAL operating in their own territory. Through her feeds, Sarah watched more contractors arriving with specialized equipment. Whatever classified weapons they were testing beneath Pine Valley, they were willing to commit significant resources to keep it hidden. Federal teams are engaging Iron Wolves at the perimeter, Torres reported. But Nexus is still moving equipment underground. Sarah, they're trying to eliminate evidence of their weapons program before. Multiple breaching charges detonated simultaneously as Ghost's teams made their final push. But Sarah had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. They thought superior force would make her surrender evidence of their illegal operation. They were about to learn why some operators never stop fighting, especially when protecting their community from unauthorized military experiments. Sarah's security systems engaged in perfect sequence as Ghost's teams breached multiple entry points. Her SEAL training had taught her that superior numbers meant nothing against properly prepared defenses. Multiple contacts, basement level, a tactical team reported. Subject has military-grade countermeasures. We're losing tactical advantage. Through her feeds, Sarah watched federal teams engaging Iron Wolves at her perimeter, while more Nexus contractors rushed to secure their railway station operation. Sarah, Torres transmitted urgently. They're moving classified weapons underground. Energy signatures are critical. Whatever they're testing down there, it's beyond anything authorized. Duke moved like a shadow through the darkness, his military training making him lethal in close quarters. The tactical teams were professional, but unprepared for a trained military dog operating in prepared terrain. Command, we've lost 3 teams to our defense systems, Ghost reported, frustration evident. Subject has complete tactical control of the environment. Request permission to escalate force. Sarah's surveillance detected massive power fluctuations at the railway station. Through her thermal imaging, she watched Nexus security rushing to secure their underground facility. Federal teams have breached the railway station, Torres reported, but Nexus is destroying evidence. They're triggering some kind of emergency protocol. Ghost's voice carried desperate authority. Mitchell, whatever you think you know about Project Echo, it's too late. Stand down, or we'll have no choice. Sarah's tactical computer decoded their encrypted transmissions. Weapons testing protocols compromised. Initiate containment procedures. Prepare for total facility purge. Through her feeds, she watched more contractors arriving with specialized equipment. They weren't just trying to secure evidence anymore. They were preparing to eliminate all traces of their illegal weapons program. All teams, fall back to defensive positions, Ghost commanded. Subject has complete tactical advantage. Prepare for federal intervention. Duke's ears perked up, detecting movement in the walls. The tactical teams were attempting one final breach, using their remaining resources to secure any evidence of Project Echo. Sarah, Torres transmitted frantically. Railway station energy signatures are critical. They're overloading their experimental weapons systems. The whole facility could... Her surveillance systems tracked multiple teams retreating as federal forces established control of the perimeter. The Iron Wolves' cover was blown, exposing Nexus Security's black operations. Command, situation compromised, Ghost reported. Federal teams have secured the railway station. Subject's evidence is already transmitted. Request immediate extraction. Sarah's tactical computer highlighted massive energy fluctuations beneath Pine Valley. Whatever classified weapons they were testing, the emergency shutdown was causing dangerous power surges. Through her secure channel, Torres coordinated with federal response teams. Sarah, we've got the facility surrounded, but these energy readings, they're beyond anything we've seen. Sarah checked her defensive positions one final time. They had tried to use superior force to protect their illegal operation. Now they were about to learn why threatening a community protected by special operations veterans was their fatal mistake. As federal teams secured her perimeter, Sarah transmitted the full evidence package: surveillance footage, thermal imaging, power signatures, everything proving Nexus Security's unauthorized weapons program. Ghost's final transmission carried defeated recognition. Stand down all teams. Operation compromised. Subject has complete tactical and intelligence advantage. Initiate emergency protocols. I'll now generate Part 10, the final resolution of our story, depicting the aftermath and conclusion of Sarah's confrontation with Nexus Security. The morning sun illuminated the full scope of Nexus Security's operation as federal teams secured the railway station facility. Sarah Mitchell stood with Detective Torres, watching hazmat teams assess the underground weapons testing site. Energy signatures are finally stabilizing, Torres reported, checking sensor readings. Whatever they were testing down here, it was way beyond classified protocols. Sarah's documentation had exposed everything: the Iron Wolves property seizures, Nexus Security's black operations, the unauthorized weapons program hidden beneath Pine Valley's streets. Now Ghost and his tactical teams faced federal charges for their role in the illegal operation. Found something interesting in their files, Torres added. Nexus wasn't just testing weapons, they were developing experimental military technology, using Pine Valley's isolated location as cover. Through secured perimeters, they watched federal agents processing evidence. The Iron Wolves intimidation campaign had provided perfect cover for Nexus Security's classified operations until they threatened the wrong dog walker. Mrs. Henderson and the other residents? Sarah asked, Duke alert beside her. Safe. Federal prosecutors are already preparing cases against Nexus for illegal property seizures. The whole operation's exposed. Sarah's surveillance data had proven crucial. Thermal imaging, power signatures, equipment manifests. Everything documenting how a private military contractor had used a motorcycle gang to hide unauthorized weapons testing in a civilian area. Ghost, now in federal custody, watched Sarah with newfound respect. You knew from the start, didn't you, that we weren't just ordinary bikers, that there was something bigger hidden under Pine Valley? Sarah met his gaze calmly. Next time you want to hide a classified operation, don't threaten a community protected by someone trained to expose exactly these kinds of black sites. The railway station's underground facility revealed its secrets as federal teams cataloged evidence. Experimental weapons, unauthorized testing protocols, classified military technology, all hidden beneath Pine Valley streets until Sarah's intervention exposed everything. They'll try to bury this under national security classifications, Torres warned. Let them try, Sarah replied, checking her final surveillance data. The evidence is already secured. Some things can't be hidden, especially when you threaten the wrong community. As federal teams completed their operation, Sarah knew Pine Valley was safe. The Iron Wolves were finished, Nexus Security's black operations exposed. They'd learned the hard way why threatening a former Navy SEAL protecting her community was their last mistake. Duke stood alert beside her, both of them watching the sunrise over a neighborhood now free from intimidation. Some battles were fought with superior numbers and equipment, but the most important ones were won by those willing to stand against those who would harm their community, no matter the cost. Sarah's intervention had exposed Nexus Security's entire operation, but the aftermath brought bigger revelations. Federal investigators discovered Project Echo wasn't isolated to Pine Valley. Similar facilities were being constructed in other communities, all using local criminal organizations as cover. Network of testing sites, Torres explained, showing Sarah classified documents. Pine Valley was just one node. They're building these facilities across the country, each hidden behind different gangs. The federal task force had expanded its investigation. Sarah's evidence provided the blueprint for exposing other black sites: thermal imaging, power signatures, property acquisition patterns. The same tactics repeated in multiple locations. Got confirmation from Washington, Torres reported. Nexus Security lost their military contracts. Their entire weapons program is under federal investigation. Ghost and his tactical teams are cooperating, revealing locations of other facilities. Through secured channels, Sarah watched the operation expand. Federal teams were moving on similar sites, each hidden beneath seemingly ordinary communities. Her intervention had triggered a nationwide response. They thought using criminal gangs as cover would protect their classified operations, Sarah observed, reviewing data with Duke at her side. Instead, it exposed their entire network. Mrs. Henderson and other residents had received full compensation, their properties protected by federal oversight. The Iron Wolves intimidation campaign had backfired spectacularly, leading investigators to multiple illegal weapons testing sites. More facilities being discovered, Torres added, checking updates. Each one using local gangs for security, same pattern as Pine Valley. Your documentation gave us the template for exposing their whole operation. Ghost, facing federal charges, provided crucial intelligence. Nexus Security's network of black sites, their use of criminal organizations, the full scope of their unauthorized weapons program, everything exposed because they threatened the wrong community. Sarah's surveillance data became the standard for identifying similar operations. Thermal imaging, power consumption patterns, property acquisition records, tools for exposing illegal military testing hidden in civilian areas. As federal teams continued their nationwide operation, Sarah knew the real victory wasn't just exposing one facility. She'd revealed how corporations used criminal organizations to hide classified operations in ordinary communities, threatening residents who discovered their presence. The morning sun illuminated Pine Valley's streets, now free from intimidation. Some victories weren't won through superior force or equipment, but through the determination to protect communities from those who would exploit them. Sarah and Duke had reminded them why threatening a Navy SEAL defending her home was their final mistake. The ripple effects of Sarah's work spread rapidly. Across the nation, investigative teams swarmed Nexus Security's hidden facilities, unearthing caches of experimental weapons and evidence of corporate collusion with criminal organizations. News of the discoveries reached national headlines, shaking public confidence in private military contractors. For Sarah, the fallout brought a mix of satisfaction and unease. She'd exposed Nexus Security, but the scale of their operations revealed a deeply embedded problem. The use of small communities as testing grounds for experimental military technology wasn't just a Nexus Security issue. It was a symptom of a broader system that placed profits over people. Detective Torres stopped by Sarah's modest home a week later, armed with coffee and updates. Duke barked once as Torres approached the door, his tail wagging at the familiar visitor. They're calling it the largest civilian exposure of unauthorized military programs in history, Torres said, handing Sarah one of the cups. Your evidence sparked congressional hearings. Nexus executives are being subpoenaed. Sarah took the cup, her expression neutral. And the people pulling the strings? The ones who gave them the contracts? Torres sighed, leaning against the doorframe. That's where it gets murky. National security gets invoked and the paper trail starts disappearing. But public pressure is mounting. People want accountability. They deserve it, Sarah replied firmly. Communities like Pine Valley shouldn't have to live in fear because someone with money decides they're expendable. Torres nodded, a rare look of admiration in his eyes. You did something remarkable here, Sarah. But I have to ask, what's next? This isn't over. You've made some powerful enemies. Sarah's lips curled into a wry smile. They'll think twice before coming after me or Pine Valley again. And if they don't, well, I'm not exactly hard to find. Meanwhile, in a sterile federal interrogation room, Ghost sat across from a team of federal agents. His confident demeanor had given way to something colder, more subdued. For years, he'd operated in the shadows, enforcing Nexus Security's will with ruthless efficiency. Now, stripped of his command and facing decades in prison, he saw the operation for what it was, a house of cards built on deception and exploitation. You're cooperating, one agent said, flipping through a file. But why? What's in it for you? Ghost's gaze didn't waver. I follow orders, but I don't condone what they did to Pine Valley, or the other communities. Nexus lied to me too. They said this was about national defense, protecting the country. Turns out it was just about money. The agent leaned forward. Then give us everything. Names, locations, logistics. Help us bring them down. Ghost hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You want the network? Fine. But promise me one thing. When this is over, you take care of the people they hurt. Back in Pine Valley, life began to return to normal. Mrs. Henderson was back to her daily walks, chatting with neighbors as if nothing had happened. The Iron Wolves were gone, their clubhouse boarded up and their bikes seized. But the scars of their intimidation campaign lingered. Sarah, however, remained a fixture in the community, her quiet vigilance a source of comfort for many. She'd always been reserved, but now residents approached her with gratitude and curiosity. One evening, as she walked Duke through the neighborhood, a young boy ran up to her, clutching a drawing. "Miss Sarah, look, I made this for you and Duke." She knelt, accepting the crayon sketch of a superhero with a German Shepherd sidekick. "Is this us?" The boy nodded eagerly. "You saved us. Mom says you're a real hero." Sarah smiled, her voice soft. "Thank you. But remember, real heroes look out for each other. That's how we keep our community safe." As the boy ran off, Sarah felt a pang of something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time: hope. Pine Valley wasn't just a place she lived, it was a place worth fighting for. The congressional hearings began weeks later, broadcast live to a captivated nation. Nexus executives squirmed under the spotlight, their carefully crafted narratives unraveling as evidence mounted against them. Sarah's surveillance footage became a key exhibit, her name invoked repeatedly as a whistleblower who had risked everything to expose the truth. In Washington, Torres testified before the committee, his badge gleaming under the harsh lights. What happened in Pine Valley was a wake-up call. These operations weren't just unethical, they were dangerous. Thanks to Sarah Mitchell, we have a roadmap to prevent this from happening again. Sarah watched the hearings from her living room, Duke sprawled at her feet. She hadn't sought recognition, but seeing the impact of her actions gave her a quiet sense of validation. Months later, Sarah received a letter from the Department of Justice. Inside was an official commendation for her role in exposing Nexus security. Along with it came a handwritten note from a federal prosecutor. "Your courage saved countless lives. If you ever consider rejoining public service, we could use someone like you." Sarah folded the letter, setting it aside. She wasn't sure what her next step would be, but for now, Pine Valley was her priority. The fight against corruption and exploitation might never end, but as long as she had Duke by her side and a community worth protecting, she knew she'd be ready. As she stepped outside to greet another sunrise, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Some battles were fought on distant battlefields, others in the streets of small towns. But all of them mattered, and in the end, it wasn't just about winning, it was about standing firm for what was right.